Welcome to the Cycle Touring Festival if it's your first event, or welcome back if it's not. This is the Cycle Touring with Children panel. So we thought touring in itself wasn't niche enough. We thought we'd make it a little bit more obscure by talking about riding around with your kids. So for those of you that don't know me already, I'm Tim. I cycled around the world once and used to do lots of expeditions for a living. I have 2 kids now, one's 2.5 and one's 5 months old. We've done a month-long tour with them through Scandinavia up to the Baltics, and we try to live as adventurously as possible, but perhaps not as exciting as the rest of our panel this morning. Used to do an evening talk. So first up, let me find my slide for Karen. When Karen's 2 boys were little, she struggled to find anything online about cycling with kids. So she set up a small blog called Cycle Sprog to share what she was learning with other parents. But somewhere in the past decade, this small blog got a bit out of hand, to the point where Karen recently gave up a job as a project manager to work on it full time with her husband, Chris. The boys are now aged 14 and 12, and she can no longer keep up with them. Her method of touring with kids is to drive or take a train to a destination and spend several days riding out of one campsite or cottage. She calls this cheating. I call it sensible. Karen's family have toured like this in Canada, the US, France, Holland, England, Wales, and Scotland. And she says that she's hoping to be inspired by the rest of the panel and one day do a proper tour. I think, Karen, you've done plenty of those already. Next up, we've got Harriet Pike. Harriet and Neil explored the Himalayas and the Andes for 8 years and soon discovered that biking was a good way to get deep into the mountains, enabling them to get to the places they wanted to track. From their experiences, they created the Andes by Bike website. They pioneered Peru's Great Divide route. They compiled the latest edition of the Adventure Cycle Touring Handbook, and they wrote a hiking and biking guide to Peru's Cordillera Blanca. Since Fitz was born in 2017 and Inti in 2019, they've tried to stay adventurous. The first, this was on foot, trekking 260 kilometers through the Pyrenees when Fitz was 3 months old, in Morocco whilst 5 months pregnant and with a 17-month-old in tow, and latterly to the Cordillera Blanca when the kids were 4 months and 2 years. Their cycle tours have been short weekenders in the UK. The Pikes live a car-free lifestyle, not carefree as autocorrect kept trying to tell me, maybe carefree as well. We'll get onto that later. They live a car-free lifestyle. So biking is there every day. The kids have spent much more time lashed to a bike than in a car, and most of their weekends involve taking a bike out into the woods. And finally, that brings us to Chris Leakey. Chris rides bikes every day for transport and to explore. He did his first tour back in 2003, and in 2009, Chris and his wife Liz set off on a 2.5-year ride of 10,000 miles between New Zealand and the UK. Chris now runs a bike business called Bambino Biking, which sort of started by accident as people kept asking him how he cycled with his kids. Offering advice and the hire and sale of equipment, Bambino's Biking's aim is simple: to help get more parents cycling. And what better way to launch into our panel than that introduction? The others do have photographs. I just forgot to change the slide. Look, there's Chris with his kids. I'll give him a minute or two of glory, and then you can see Harriet and Child in a moment. So a long introduction from me, far more than was required. I think I'd like to hear from you three, really. And my first question is, to whoever wants to go first, what was your first trip with your kids, or what was a favourite trip?
Go ahead. Our first little cycle tour with both kids was we set off from home and we cycled along familiar trails like a Sustrans route out into Somerset, and did a loop for 4 days and sort of planned a couple of campsites along the way and did one night wild camping. It was just like about 4 hours touring each day, had a few bits of hilly stuff, and then lots of time on the Somerset levels, and loads of time on these cycle trails. And like, yeah, it worked really well. We had the kids in the trailer in the back, so we have a Tula chariot, and yeah, it was great tour.
Shall I go next? I'll do my favourite tour. That was when we went. It was actually 2 consecutive years. We went to America and Canada. First year, both years we flew into Vancouver and flew out to Calgary. And the first year we stayed in Canada and did about 5 different centres in Canada. Just drove to them, camped up, and then rode from there. And then the following year, we loved it so much we went back, but we went south into the northern states of America, Washington and Montana and Oregon. And we had a whole month, both summers, away with the boys, which was just amazing to spend all that time together as a family.
I think, and I say I think because sort of cycling has been like the sort of everyday transport, so it's sort of hard to remember which was the sort of the very first trip that we did and what happened. But certainly for cycle camping, we went out to the Peak District from our home in Manchester, and we cycled all the way out there with the 2 kids, and it was the first time all the elements had been sort of connected together. We'd camped with the car with the kids, and we'd just used all the cycling equipment, but we'd never combined everything together in one trip. And it was a test to see whether it would work and whether we could do more. And it was successful. We just took it very easily, and we only cycled, I think, sort of like 30 kilometers or something like that. It wasn't very far. And we got to a campsite in the dark. And fortunately, we pre-made food, which was the best thing we ever did. And the next day, we were just tired, and so we just got to the train station and came back by train. But it was just a perfect sort of introduction from for us at the time.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that for everyone listening at home. It's a strange environment because I can't see your faces, I can't hear your responses, or get a judge, and there's a very limited interaction. But I do have one mechanism, which is a poll. So if you've been on a talk with me before, you should be prepared for this, some exam questions. So I'm gonna fire a quick question at you now. Hopefully, it should appear on your screen. I'm just trying to get a gauge of how much cycling with kids you've done before. I can well imagine there's some grizzled veterans who've done far more than me, and then people who've not done any yet, and that's absolutely fine. It just helps us know who we're talking to and how to pitch things. So I'm getting the results in now. Most people have responded. I'll give you a couple more seconds for the last ones to come through. Okay, right, I'm going to click end, and then hopefully you'll be able to see the results in a moment. So you should be able to see there. It looks like about half of us in the audience have done a bit of stuff. The good few, maybe 1 or 3 have done some touring already, and then a few have not done any cycling with kids yet. So just to say, I'm about to ask the panelists to talk me through just briefly that their setup is for cycling with the kids. But just a reminder, there's the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if at any point you come up with a question, put it in there, and it'll come through to me, and then we'll try to get through as many as we can with the panelists. But in the meantime, Chris, would you like to talk us through your cycling setup with your kids? How do you go about it?
Yeah, I think most people will realise or find that the setup changes quite quickly as the kids grow, but at the moment we're in the sort of follow me tandem stage. So the kids' bicycles are able to attach into the back of our bicycles with a device called the Follow Me Tandem, and then you've got the option to be connected together as a tandem, or disconnect. The Follow Me Tandem folds up, and the kids can ride independently. And this gives me the most flexibility, I think, because if you're in traffic, when the kids were younger, I think Alex was about 4 when we first started using it when we went to the Netherlands, and it meant that we could do the traffic bits without worrying, and then when it was safe, he could ride by himself. My youngest, Sophie, she still prefers to have the little seat, which is basically a top tube mounted seat. It's a non-branded one that we had that one of the mechanics in the bike shop gave to me, that was built in a shed in London somewhere. And, but it was brilliant, and still now she uses that quite a bit. We did on our last, well, just over a year ago actually, when we went and did Hadrian's Wall, we had an extra adult with us, and we had 2 follow me's and a trailer, which we had as backup in case one of the kids got really tired. And we did use it on one day actually, so it was quite useful. So I think flexibility is a key to anything, but yeah, that's what we're currently using.
Gotcha. Okay, quite a few different options. I like that. And remind us, how old are Alex and Sophie now?
They are 7 and 5 now.
Great. Okay, thanks. And Harriet, your 2 are much younger, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're at the moment they're just under 2 and 4, nearly 4, and so they're both in the trailer most of the time. But it does get, and so we've got the trailer on the back, which is the Tula Chariot I mentioned before, which is bomb-proof. Yeah, we took it down some pretty gnarly stuff in Scotland, as my photo showed, and like it really, yeah, it was amazing. It's got suspension in there, it was really good. And then Neil cycled with 4 panniers. He had like the kind of the big panniers on the front of his bike for carrying all our stuff, all our camping gear. And then we've got like a little balance bike that we put on the back of the chariot, and we have had another little tiny seat for the front mounted on there as well, because we found that the kids got a bit bored if you were just in like the trailer, and so having multiple options, whether it's they're walking behind or Fitz pushed the trailer up the hill at one point. I was really proud that he was helping out and stuff like that. I think it's, yeah, like variety is really important, and like that front seat, the view that they get from there, they love it, and it's really nice because you can really chat to them about what's going on, or you can sing a song. And like our first tours with just Fitz when he was little, we mounted it on a fat bike, and then we could just like tour with a fat bike with him mounted on the front, and like, yeah, you sing and chat, and like it's really good. And we didn't have anywhere that he could sleep, so we had to stop and like put his cot up on the side of the road, but it did mean that we could get on into some quite gnarly terrain on the fat bikes with that setup, so that was quite cool.
Yeah, that's really good. So Chris, you were talking about just like literally a saddle sat in front of you for yours, but Harriet, you're talking about more of a full child seat, is that right?
Yeah, we had like, there's the Tula it's the Tula Mini on the front, and that's like good from, I think they started using that when they were about 6 months old, just on sort of like good surface, and then by the time they were kind of on the fat bike, they were a bit older, like at least 1 by that point.
Gotcha. And did you find Laura's got one of those front seats, but she found her legs had to sort of go out to the side a bit. Do you just deal with that, or was it different?
Like your trousers get worn out on the inside of your legs and stuff, and you just cycle like a kind of like your characteristic old man kind of style like that, and you get used to it. Neil hates it. He just won't ride with that seat. He really doesn't like it at all. But yeah, I quite like it, and definitely around town it's awesome that you just talk about everything, so it's great.
Oh, very good. The word Tula, I'm gonna put it in the chat, because you in the audience probably all knew how it was pronounced like that. In my head, I say it Thule. So in case anyone's not recognizing the brand, I'll just put it there. I've got their stuff as well. That's excellent. Aaron, your kids are much older now. Talk to us about
how I've been through everything that, especially what Chris mentioned, they keep growing and you have to keep finding a new way of dealing with them. So we started out with a rear seat, then with one of them, then we had 2, so we had them in the trailer. Then we moved to the point where I couldn't carry them both in the trailer, so then they went to a front seat, and I think we had a tag along for a bit because the Follow Me hadn't been invented at that point. And I think as Harriet said, having them in front of you on that front seat was, I think, my favourite bit, where you can actually ride along with them right by you and have those conversations. And I really missed it when they grew out of that phase, and suddenly they're behind you again. Well, we then moved on to the Follow Me when that came out, and then they started riding their own bikes, and we've just progressed through the wheel sizes. What I've now been sent, I got sent recently, was a tow rope. Where you can pull the child behind you up the hills, but mine are a bit old for that, so I did check with them, and it should work the other way. So I'm hoping going forward that they'll pull me up the hills, because I just can't keep up with them anymore. They're, you know, really, I mean, my eldest is 6'2" now. He's 14, so I really struggle to keep up with him.
The tow rope, that's just as simple as it sounds. You just put it on at the bottom of a steep hill and take it off at the top.
Yeah, it's elasticated. Yeah, there's two makes. There's one called the Towie, which has been around for a while, and then there's another one by Shotgun, which has literally been released, I think, last month. And yeah, the concept is you tie it to your seat post, and then you hook it around the kids' handlebars, and you pull them up. So yeah, I wish that had been invented when ours were younger, because it would have saved so many moans and groans.
Great. Okay, that's really useful to get a picture of it, and we've already got a few kit related questions coming in, as I knew we would, and what I'm thinking is I'm probably going to save those towards the end, because for two reasons. Partly because there's kit questions are never ending. You can never have enough information, or you feel like you've never got enough information. And then secondly, there is a reasonable amount of kit information online, but touring with kids, I think, is the real niche, and I think it's pretty rare to have three people like you in the same room virtually. So I'm going to go in with a few questions about that. And one of the things I'm curious about is whether touring with kids really requires meticulous planning in advance, because you've got to be extra safe and you've got to plan for every eventuality, and therefore you need to plan your routes and your stops and everything. Or can you still wing it? And in some ways, is it better to wing it because it's too hard to plan with kids? So anyone fancy picking up on that one?
I'll go on that one. The first, I say, bigger trip where we went to the Netherlands for about 10 days, and I've been wanting to do this for ages. I was just like, this is ridiculous. The kids are sort of 4 years old, and we've not done a proper long trip, and just the logistics. I'm not a particularly brilliant planner when it comes to touring. I'm sort of more get on the bike and figure it out a little bit. So in the end, I just booked the ferry ticket, and it was a 10-day return. And I think we had the first campsite sort of that was near the ferry port, and that was as much planning as we did for the 10 days, pretty much. But what we had was full camping equipment, so essentially we were free to do whatever we needed. We could camp wherever we wanted to, and so on. And so it was a good way for me to get out and just do it the first time. However, a bit more planning is helpful. But that first trip, we didn't. I mean, some of the days we sort of cycled about 10 miles just because we were faffing around and didn't really have an objective. So yeah, subsequent trips we've had a bit more of a plan, which has been good. So yeah, it was a good way to start. But yeah, going forward, having a little bit more of a plan is helpful.
And then just to check, it sounded like you've never been a big sort of meticulous planner for your trips, but it sounded like you might be leaning towards doing a bit more with kids. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think now that what I felt is that it was hard to sort of, without a goal, that we were sort of all agreeing. I think now that the kids are sort of vocal and they sort of want to be part of it a little bit, or they need some motivation because they're not that interested in what's going on. So yeah, having some kind of goal, and I think looking at some themes as well for the next trip, so that it's not just about the cycling for everyone. I think that will be beneficial and helpful to make it enjoyable for everyone as well.
Yeah, I like that idea. I might be keen to hear those perhaps later. We're planning a tour hopefully for this summer when, touch wood, things are a bit freer and easier. And her first suggestion was touring Lidos around the country, which feels like it'd be something for everyone. She's a super keen wild swimmer, and the boys are not going to object to getting to go in a swimming pool every now and again. So that would be a good excuse.
Yeah, now mine are a bit older as well. I found involving them in the planning process is really good. So they know what's coming up, and then they can be excited about it, and they can have inputs into what they want to do, where they want to go, what they want to go and see, and that sort of thing. And that helps keep them engaged. I think when I made mistakes was when I didn't involve them and they had no idea what was going on. And they don't necessarily like not having an input into it anymore. In terms of the planning, though, I made a big mistake when we went to Canada the first time. I thought, I'm going to be really chilled about this. I'm going to book the accommodation on the first night and the last night, and then we're just going to go from campsite to campsite, and it's going to be great. And then we were in an Airbnb on the first night, and I told the guy what we were planning, and he looked on me on horror, and he was just like, "You are joking me." And it turns out that in Canada, campsites are nothing like they are here. For starters, they're like miles apart, but everybody books their slot, and everyone has their favorite slot, and they go online on the 1st of April and the site crashes because everybody is so keen to book them up. And he was just like, "You are kidding me, you're not going to go and just turn up at places." So I had to spend the rest of the holiday trying to book a few days in advance, and lots of places I thought we'd just rock at were completely fully booked. So I had to just completely rechange our schedule and go to different places. So I should have done a lot more planning if you go to somewhere like that.
Yeah, clearly, and that sounds, in fairness, that sounds like a national difference rather than.
Yes, it was.
I remember I lived in New Zealand for a little bit, and walking the national trails there was a complete. I do trails in the UK, obviously smaller, and it's you just turn up and do it, whereas New Zealand's all booked in advance. Okay.
Yeah, I had no idea, and it ruined it for me a bit because it was very stressful, because I always felt I was trying to catch up and spending a lot of time on my laptop trying to work out how to book places and trying to find internet connections and that sort of thing. So the second time I booked it all in advance, and it took some of the spontaneity out of it, but it was a much more enjoyable experience.
I really like the first point you made about involving the kids in the planning, obviously when they're a bit older. One of the parenting books I was reading recently was not obviously about cycle touring. Those books don't exist yet, but was saying that very sort of thing. If there's things your kids don't like doing, then get them involved and in working out the solution and what they want to do in advance, rather than just telling them no on the spot.
Yeah, we're finding that a lot at the moment with a 3-year-old, that he will not leave the house if we say we're going to the woods to go biking. But if you get the map out and say, where do you want to go, it's much more likely to say, oh, there. Yeah, and then be really sort of keen to get out and do his little adventure. So yeah, that's it. With the planning side of things, we found that you need to be a bit more meticulous in that you can't run out of food. You can't not have somewhere to sleep at the end of the night. You can't just keep riding into the dark until you find somewhere that's just not going to work. So that needs to be planned, but also you need complete flexibility, because you don't know what's going to happen with the kids, what's going to happen with the weather that's going to stop you. So it's kind of, yeah, it's a little bit of both, I think. Different change in mentality.
Yeah, and I always try and have a plan B. I kind of know what plan A is, and I'm quite meticulous about that, but there's always that plan B, that if this doesn't work, if it's chucking down with rain, they decide they don't want to ride anywhere, you've got something up your sleeve that you can always keep them entertained or occupied.
We had a good one where we thought I was like, oh yeah, we'll go to and stay in this campsite because there's a pub next door that says it does food. When we got there, we're like, no, we don't have any food, and we're in the middle of nowhere. But luckily, they were like, but you can dial for pizza from miles away. So we're like, this guy turned up in this camping field with some pizza, and you're like, okay, guys.
Okay, that's very helpful. My main takeaway is that if you're touring with kids, then you need to plan more and be more flexible. So easy. We've got an interesting question coming from Jack, asking for tips about getting the balance between time on the bikes and time off the bikes, and how that sort of affects the distances that you're able to cover and how you divide up the day.
I think you have to build in time off the bikes. We have days where we just don't ride at all, because otherwise you know, A, they get bored, B, it becomes almost, is that just the whole purpose of this, when we could be going places that are quite exciting, have got other things they want to do. So we definitely don't try and spend all the time on the bike. In terms of timings during the day, we always try and make sure, you know, we factor in plenty of leeway. You know, we don't sort of try and do a whole day of cycling because it never works out. I think Chris mentioned, you know, there's a lot of faffing around at the beginning and the end of the day getting things ready. So you have to really sort of temper your expectations into how long you are actually going to spend pedaling, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. We kind of like decided that around the 3 to 4 hour mark on biking, that was probably our limit. And we would, with the little ones, there's always like the afternoon nap, so we'd kind of like be quite chilled and stop in the morning and kind of be quite relaxed, and then like just be like biking like hell all afternoon, like, come on, we've got to get this many kilometers in the nap time, come on, like this. And so we weren't covering huge distances, but and it depends on the terrain as well, like what how many hills and stuff you have you can fit in that time, because that trailer pulls you backwards. It's hard to get up those hills.
I think it kind of depends on the trip to a degree, and like, I've been on trips where things have been a little bit more time critical, in the sense that we booked accommodation like a B&B. When we did Hadrian's Wall, it was all bed and breakfast. We weren't cycle camping. It was the family decision to sort of do it that way first time, and we didn't really have much choice but to sort of get to those places, because that was it. Was other trips have been sort of like, when we're tired we'll just stop, or there's a campsite there or whatever. So but yeah, I think it's just keeping it enjoyable and dialing into the mood of everybody. Certainly I think on a lot of the trips that I've done, we probably haven't factored in enough sort of days off and sort of exploring, and that's something that I want to do more of for the next trips that we're planning, so that we've got that sort of downtime built in to the planning.
You have to be careful, because we've fallen foul of the thing where we've had some downtime and we've actually done more and worn ourselves out more doing the stuff off the bike. So then you get up the next day, it's like, oh gosh, we're all exhausted.
Thank you. That's useful. Thank you very much. And Harriet, I can definitely recognise the we used to call it sort of like the nap time shuttle. When we did a tour with he was about 10, 11 months old. He'd have nap in the morning and the afternoon. And that was it. About 2 hours each time. And it was exhausting, because we might only do 3-4 hours of cycling, but we were cycling hard and you're getting some good miles in, just frantically.
With the trek, like in the Pyrenees, it would be the same thing, but you were like, okay, this is the only chance we've got to walk, and I can't put him down because he'll wake up. So then you'd be like, have him lashed to you, and you'd be like, I really need a wee, and I've got to get to the next place. And this, yeah.
Yeah, I won't describe my method for keeping the trailer moving whilst having a wee, so I didn't wake up my child. We'll save that for an offline discussion. So my next question I'm about to ask about is camping with kids. We've had a question come in from a family, the 5 of them, who've done quite a bit of touring by the sounds of things, usually on the continent, but they've always used hostels rather than camping, and they're keen to try some time in tents. So be interested to hear what your setup is, and the times you've chosen tents over hostels or vice versa, and if it's changed over time. And while you do that, I'm going to put a jumper on, because I wanted to wear my festival t-shirt to look like I was playing the part, but frankly it's February and it's freezing, so I'll do that if someone wants to start talking about camping.
I'll start with the little ones. We've got we're just using at the moment for their sleeping bags, we're using the 3.5 tog sleeping bags that are just like an upgraded version of what they use in their cots, and we found that I can take a gilet along for myself and then put that over them, and that doubles as an extra layer of sleeping bag, so that's quite a good setup. And we had like a little pop-up cot that's called a Cootie Cot that went around them when they were really little, and just because they were quite mobile in their sleep, and they'd end up kind of like, you didn't know where they were going to end up in the tent, and like I was always like worrying they're going to like suffocate.
What's really little, Harriet? What sort of ages are you talking about there?
So that was when they were kind of under 1. Once they could stand up and walk around, it didn't really work anymore, but they sort of tended to stay still. And then so that's kind of the stage we're at. We've got a big 4-man tent that they can stand up in. They tend to treat it a little bit like a boxing ring, and they want to like catapult themselves off the edges. So, and it's surviving so far. So we're quite pleased with that. And we just have like firm rest down the floor, and lash that onto the bikes.
Which make is your tent?
It's the Big Agnes Copper Spur 4. Yeah, it's amazing. I was like, oh, should we buy it? It's so much money. And I'm so pleased with it. It's going to last forever, I know.
My justification for buying expensive tents is you just tot up the number of nights in a hotel and just say, well, it's a lot cheaper than that.
That's exactly what I did,
yeah. We also have a 4-person tent. It's a sort of large tunnel tent with a big porch. It's actually quite a cheap one. I haven't managed to buy the expensive one yet, but I'm saving up and I'm hoping to do it this year. I like having a porch. That's, I guess, one of my big things. I've always liked that, even pre-kids. It does give you a bigger sort of area to find to put up a tent, but just being able to cook and function in that space if it's really horrible outside was really advantageous. The first time we went, we had to use two-man tents because we didn't have one, and the kids are still small enough that I would prefer them to be all in the same space. I know some families have a tent for the kids and a tent for the adults, but we're not at that stage yet. And then I think in terms of just the sleeping side, I think the first time we took Sophie camping, she was about 6 months old, I think, and we did a walking trip. It was just to a bothy in Scotland, and it was quite cold overnight and we sort of just had her wrapped in down jackets. But after that, I decided that I didn't want to have to worry about it, so we invested in a down sleeping bag that was it was like the grow bags that you get, but this was specifically made for outdoors, and so it's got a Pertex outer and a down inner. It was quite expensive, but it just that combined with a down jacket just was phenomenal for not having to worry about camping in all seasons, really. And that was a really good investment from our side, and Tim's got the sleeping bag now, I think. So
it was an excellent investment from our side. Yeah, we're looking forward to using that this summer.
It's it's Milk and Honey is the company that make it, and Cass Gilbert, the person that I got it from originally, the idea, and I brought it to the UK, it's a fantastic sleeping bag. I'd like to bring them in and sell them. Actually, I think that would be a really good product to have in the UK.
Yeah, that sounds like the good kind of niche product that, there's not going to be millions of people that want it, but there's going to be a few, and they'll be willing to order it, I'm sure. So yeah, Karen, again, I guess you've been through all those different stages, but your kids are a bit older now.
We didn't camp with them when they were really little, sort of Harriet's kids' ages. We always stayed in hostels or in cottages or things like that, Airbnbs. But when they got a bit older, I bought a Hooley. It was called a Hooley 4. Wild mountain thing, which I thought was going to be a 4-man tent, and when it arrived it said it was a 3-man, so it was really, really tight. But we toured around, we did both of our North American trips with it, and the boys, they were 7 and 10 the first time and 8 and 11 the next time. The second time it was very, very tight. It was sort of all cramped in, but it had the all-important porch, which I agree with Chris is really important. We've now upgraded that to sort of a 6. I think it's called the Hooley 6. So it's got a separate compartment, which the younger one was sleeping in. I think, looking at my 14-year-old, we're going to have to do something different in future. So we'll probably finally move to the 2-tent solution, I think, just to give us a bit more privacy and a bit more space. I think in terms of, I think the question was as well, how do you know when to camp and how do you know when to go in hostels? I think, I guess it depends on the weather, how confident you are with all the kit. I mean, we started out, the reason we didn't camp was because I just couldn't face buying all the kit and sorting it all out and everything, because we didn't have anything. So and I knew they were going to grow so quickly, so that's why we didn't camp. And then now it feels as though, okay, we're buying stuff and it's a longer term investment, so I was happy to do that. And then just another thing I wanted to mention, when we went to America, we obviously couldn't take all our kit with us. So we only took the expensive stuff that we knew, and we were really happy with, like the tent and the thermarests and that sort of stuff. And then when we got there, we went to the Salvation Army thrift shop and just bought up all of our kind of pots and pans and all that sort of stuff. And then we went to their equivalent of sort of Go Outdoors, Halfords, and bought the disposable stuff that we were happy to just chuck at the end. And then at the end of the trip, we took it all back to the Salvation Army at the end destination, and again, it paid for itself. It was much cheaper than hotels for the whole time we were there.
I like that. That's a nice way to sort of combine the certain things you need to have, decent quality so you can rely on them keeping you warm or dry or whatever it is. But lots of stuff does not need to be fancy or expensive.
I think probably one time when you might not want to camp was we did this trip in Scotland and got eaten alive by the midges. It was absolutely horrific. So that might be a top tip: Scotland, don't camp. Who knew? So yeah.
Yeah, we're looking to do a trip to Scotland, and I've always been slightly put off by the concept of the midges, and it's just timing it at the right time of year. I think for us as a family now, I think my wife prefers to cycle and camp in the summer, and if we're going to go in the colder months, then using hostels or hotels, B&Bs. I'm happy to cycle all year round and camp, and I think my daughter is as well, but not my son. So it's just gauging on who wants to do what. I think last year me and my daughter just did an overnight, and we just cycled out to the Peak Districts and camped in sort of 1st or 2nd of January, just in wild camped on the side, and came back again, and it was just a great little trip, very short.
I think you also have to think about what else is going on in your life at the time, because there is a certain amount of preparation for a camping trip and then all the clearing up afterwards. And sometimes if you're really busy with work or something else, it's just like, actually, if this is actually going to happen, we have to make it as easy as possible.
I think that's a really valid point, actually. Yeah, you want to be looking forward to the weekend of cycling, not dreading it. And if that means hostel for you, then I think that's got to be the answer. I'm sure some people would relish the camping bit, but there absolutely is a lot more faff and admin involved in staying out under the stars.
Yeah, is that still looking at the pile of stuff on a Thursday going, I really should have dealt with that, but you don't get back till late on a Sunday night and you're up and working on Monday morning. It's yeah.
And Chris, were you saying it was Sophie doesn't mind camping in the cold, but not Alex? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean kids are sort of so variable. I like when they don't like food, I just sort of say, oh, it's a Tuesday, so you don't like peas, but and Wednesday they do like peas. But and I think that there is a lot of change, but generally speaking, Sophie tends to be less bothered by, but she's more excited by going on adventures at this stage, which is great.
I love the image. Sophie's a tiny, cute as a button little blonde girl, and I love the fact that she's the one that sounds like more up for the adventures and the cold weather than her big brother. It's excellent.
Yeah, definitely.
So a topic I wanted to ask about was to do with whether you cycle on roads or you look for traffic-free routes all the time, or indeed if you go off roads, and if you're on roads, how do you ensure safety? And is it I think Harriet's already proved that it is, but is it possible, how practical is it to go off-road, and what sort of age can you do those things? So I don't know if someone would like to pick up on one of those things, or those topics.
You go to Holland and you can cycle anywhere you want all the time. That's the key when they're younger. We do a lot of, my boys are into mountain biking, so we tend to go find a campsite and ride off-road. And I just don't like riding with the kids on the road when they're younger. It's a bit
For
different
safety
now.
reasons.
Yeah, unless you can be absolutely certain. I mean, we went, we had some really sort of, I wouldn't say unpleasant circumstances, but you know, you're riding off road, you're having a great time, and then you come back on road, and you know, it's just the relaxing aspect of it has just disappeared straight away. You know, you're constantly on guard when they're riding themselves. It was different when they're in trailers and tag-alongs and stuff. That's a little bit easier, but when they're trying to do it themselves, it can be quite off-putting, especially if you're in a place where they're riding on the side of the road they're not used to as well. That can be quite difficult.
Gotcha. And it sounds like an obvious question, but Holland, because obviously it's got all the cycle lanes, and then I guess also it's really easy to get to. I guess those are the two things.
Yeah, I mean, we've also cycled in Portland when we were over in America, and that was the same. It's that thing that I think until you've actually been there and ridden there, you can't explain that there is no worry, because the cycle paths are everywhere. So you don't have to think, how am I going to get from A to B? You can just do it. And until you actually live that, you don't realize what a difference it makes. You know, we're so far from that in the UK. You know, it would be decades of development to get to where they are.
I can well believe that. When we our trip last year was, or whenever it was, I lose track with COVID. We went to the Baltic coast and Scandinavia, because the either following cycle routes or just deserted empty islands with no cars, and for the primarily for the reason that it was going to be safe, you wouldn't have to worry about it, and then plus it was flat, so that was quite good.
Yeah, I think some of the Scottish islands are quite similar with the sort of car to bike ratio as well. I know quite a lot of families go there.
Okay. Chris, what about you guys?
I think it's one of the biggest challenges of cycling as a family is where to go that's traffic calm or traffic free. And I think that, you know, I don't think I know anyone that would want to cycle in heavy traffic with the kids. We went to the Netherlands for the very, very reason that I couldn't find somewhere that you could have a multi-day trip in the UK without having to take copious amounts of public transport or drive everywhere, and we didn't want that experience. So that the Netherlands was what we did, and even when I sort of look at trips in the UK, it just involves a lot of extra planning, I think, which is probably why I've been put off, because I'm not that meticulous. But we are looking to do some more this year, and just try and figure out what to do with those sections where you have got the road. We've got the kids on the Follow Me tandem for the road section, so that they're not riding independently, and they're not ready for that yet. But equally, you know, when we did Hadrian's Wall, and it was the majority of it was sort of off-road or quiet roads, but there was a couple of sections where it was a busier road and it was just very unenjoyable. And we wanted to get off there as soon as possible, and to sort of the more relaxing trails and paths. So yeah, I'm excited by some of the Cycling UK off-road routes, and I think that they'll be quite interesting to start exploring now.
And then I'll just come to you in a moment, Harriet, but just in the chat, someone said they did a 4-day tour around Norfolk and found that was quiet roads and quite flat. So that's the other end of the country from Scotland, but another tip. But Harriet, what sort of riding do you tend to do?
Well, before we had kids, we would basically never tour on roads. We hate roads, and it's all about the off-road stuff. So if we're going to tour, we're not going to do that anyway. And so that's why I think we've done lots of hiking as well, because it's sometimes easier to get off-road. But we found this great off-road route all the way through Somerset. There was like 100-meter section where we had to be on a busy B road, and that was it. But it took a lot of, I mean, I love researching routes. I spend hours on like Google and on all the, like, I have Komoot, Google everything up, and so that was part of like the fun of it, was finding that off-road route. But yeah, it has to be that. There was only one section where like a farmer had sort of put a barrier across his route and said no way through the farm, and so we had to take a detour with the trailer on a bridle path, and it was so uneven, and at one point the trailer like hit a rock and went right up on the side. You were just like, like this is not ideal. But I would that was, even then, you know, that's safer than being on the roads. Like it's, yeah, you can control it. And So yeah, and I think we're looking at like tours. I'd love to do like the Great Divide route with like kids, and sort of like some long gravel, and also looking at some stuff in the Pyrenees. There were some amazing gravel routes we saw there, and so really hungry to get out there, possibly this summer.
Right, and when Harriet says that she likes planning routes, but I saw her give a talk before she had kids, her and Neil, which involved them. They'd look at a satellite image of some mountains in the Andes, and they'd see a little dirt track, like a goat track, going to the top, and another one coming down the other side with nothing in the middle. So they'd cycle up to it and think there must be a way across. Then they'd end up carrying their bikes on their backs for 4 days, cycle down the other side, and then think that was a brilliant trip. So that's the kind of route plan that Harriet likes.
It was pushed at the age of 3, so you have to learn.
No one's actually asked yet what age are the kids old enough to push their bikes over a mountain, but I'm glad we ticked it off. And one of my questions, I've got a mountain bike, but I'm rubbish at it, and the idea of going off road with a child, it just makes me worried I'm going to fall off. Basically, do I need to get better at biking, or are there plenty of routes you think I could do that don't, we're talking about flat gravel, and I shouldn't be falling off?
I think it's all about the flat gravel.
Yeah.
I think as they get older, though, they get more adventurous. So we became big fans of trail centres where you've got the graded rides, so that you know what you're getting. And then I can remember we did our sort of first proper mountain bike ride just out in the country, where we went out all day and did that, and it was surprisingly early for them, actually. I think my youngest was 6 or 7, and we actually went off and rode around Kentmere. We live up in the Lake District, and I thought that they were going to be teenagers before we did that. So I think if they're on their bikes all the time, they're very confident, they have no fear. Mine also have done a lot of cycle training through the British Cycling Go Ride scheme. So they've done a lot of mountain bike camps in the holidays and things like that, so that they know the technique. So they're much more proficient, I think, than I ever was, because they know all about body positioning and how to maneuver the bike. And then it just gets to the sort of terrifying stage where they're going, "Can I do the black run, Mum?" And you're kind of going, "Oh God, what do I do?" And I remember we were up in Scotland at one of the trail centres of the Seven Stains up there, and there was a guy, a husband and wife, and they were relegated to YouTube videos, and they sort of stood at the bottom of the jumps, and the kids did the tricks, and they were supposed to film it, and it was kind of, "Have you got that, Mum? Have you got that, Dad?" So I think, it's an evolution.
That's really interesting. I'd not thought of getting them trained up. What was the name of you mentioned maybe it was a Cycle UK or CTC?
British Cycling's Go Ride scheme have got lots of all around the country, lots of cycle clubs that do children's activities, and if you're lucky, if you live near one, they'll have sort of holiday camps. So mine have done quite a lot of skills camps.
That's ace. I think I just saw Harriet jotting that down, and she's going to have a 2 and a 4-year-old signed up in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
And she started doing the trails at Bristol. Like she's like, when she was 18 months, she started doing some of the trails, and she's just like fearless on her little balance bike. I'm like, whoa, okay.
Okay, well, it does sound like, as a general rule, we're sort of erring away from too much road cycling and either finding really quiet places, getting on cycle-free routes, particularly in countries where you've got hundreds of miles of it. I think a lot of Europe has got that sort of thing. We're looking at Germany, if COVID allows, or indeed off-road, and maybe I need to just get over the fear and realise that there are lots of flat tracks that don't require stunts, and those that do, you can send your kids to camps to learn to teach.
This is make of the trip that we did. Was it 2 years ago when we all met up in the peaks and we did that first section? There was a little bit of off-road there.
Yeah, and that was absolutely fine. I think probably because at first I didn't know it was coming. Second, I mean, I was on my touring bike, which had skinny slick tires on. I remember one of the other dads, John, chuckling as I was skidding away trying to get traction on the steep hill. But that was absolutely that was totally fine. Yeah, and I hadn't really thought in my head that wasn't even off road, but of course, we were going up a hill, weren't we? There was no cars around. Yeah. Right, so I'm aware time's slipping away, and we have got a fair few questions coming in, so I'm going to fire some at you for some slightly quicker answers, if I may. And one of them is about taking toys and games and books for your kids. How much storage space do you dedicate to that? And then if not too much storage space, do you have any tricks up your sleeve for bad weather entertainment?
With us, we always take books, sort of like Julia Donaldson style books, like Fitzville. As long as you've got a few of those, depends how long you're going, then he'll happily read those for a while. He loves listening to podcasts everywhere we go. When we go in across, like, out for the day, he'll listen to podcasts in the trailer as well. And that, like, if Inti's having a nap, he'll listen to podcasts, and those are really good. So there's loads on BBC Sounds, listening to those. And I'm not sure if Inti's going to sit still in the way that Fitz does, though. She's much more active, but she does like little fidget toys. Like, there's one which just, you put straps together and she'll just sit there and like try and plug in straps for ages, probably working out how to get out of the trailer in the long run, but but I think it's whatever they're into at the time, isn't it? Like, it all changes.
I'm just loving the idea of a 3-year-old listening to Melvin Bragg on his headphones of a morning. Karen, what about you? I mean, I guess maybe a bit older for toys perhaps at this stage.
Yeah, one thing we do is books, and go to bookshops when we get places, charity shops or even, secondhand bookshops, and then they love picking the next book, and then you just jettison the old one, so that can be quite handy. And then I absolutely hate it, but keeps them occupied. I was like, the first trip I was like, no phones, no nothing, no devices, and then now it's just like, oh god, you can have a go.
Yeah, I think I'm the same, really. I tried really hard to not have digital entertainment, but for my own sanity, it was the only thing that worked. And when we went away to the Netherlands, I can't remember if they had some just basic kids kind of Kindle tablets or just some old phones, which I'd preloaded, so it was all offline, with the kind of favorite things that they like. And yeah, that was just for those moments when you just need them to be quiet because there's something going on, or when we're putting up a tent and they just it was the only way that I've ever found, really. I would have taken a little bag of toys on some trips, but again, I think that my daughter prefers to sort of sit and play with those kind of things. With my son, really, he's either sort of trying to jump off a cliff or sat still watching the tablet. So it's kind of one extreme or the other.
But we also find that when you actually get somewhere and they're outdoors and there's a campsite and there might be a river for them to play in or trees for them to climb, they do forget the digital devices at those times, and that's so lovely to just see them back in nature playing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what the one advantage of like organized like campsites where they've got a playground. That's been a massive sort of like entertainment factor, and then also having other kids to play with as well. When we've thought with other people, then they've kind of got more people to play with, so that's great.
I think our Somerset tour first felt like a tour of playgrounds, because you're just basically going from one to the next, and it's kind of, then you're like, oh, the best playground in Somerset is in Radstock. Who knew? So.
There's a guidebook coming right up there. There's lots of suggestions coming in on chat. Probably my favourite is the suggestion of a tin whistle, which apparently had some 30 odd years of use and attracts lots of other campers. I feel like that would probably do my head in after the first 90 seconds, but you've got another option there. Right, we have had lots of kit questions, so I'm gonna start firing some of those out since they're obviously popular. One of them is asking about a front seat for a drop bar tourer. I'm assuming drop bars as in like drop handlebars. Hopefully that, perhaps you can shout up if I've misunderstood that. So any thoughts? Any thoughts on that?
There's so many factors that will sort of affect this, and at the end of the day, it's whether or not it would fit practically on the bike, but then there's whether it's comfortable for you. If it physically goes on there and it's comfortable to ride, then that's okay. With the drop bars, generally because they're narrower, it's harder, because you haven't got the reach around with the child in the way, as it were. Yeah, and again, the frame geometry plays a massive part. Like, you know, what fits on one bike with drop bars might not fit on another, just because the geometry is slightly different. So that's why I started the cycling library, so that people could try things without having to spend 80 quid on a seat and then figure out it doesn't actually fit. So yeah, I think that's my suggestion, is if you can find a local library then and try stuff out, then that's the best solution.
Also, or a friend who's got one that you can borrow.
And Chris, just to remind you, Chris's website, his company's called Bambino Biking. So I don't know if you list them on there, or if you might be able to.
Yeah, we've
email on anything.
We've sort of put it to sort of sleep for COVID, just the practicalities of lending out equipment, and other areas being busier. We've just not had the facilities to do that. But I'm hoping to bring it back this spring.
Gotcha. Thank you. And okay. And next up is about ages of starting things. So one of them is about age of start cycling with your baby, as in how young, and whether you use a trailer or something else. And then following on from that, what age did you start using the follow me tandem? And I mean, I'll start with that. We got our kid in his trailer for about 6 months. Was when we first put him in. Same similar one to Harriet's, two lay one. But yeah. How young did he start? What did he use with them? And then what age did he get him in a follow me?
Yeah, like in the trailer was around 6 months. But we only got our trailer for our second kid. So I would say to anyone, if you do plan on having 2 children, buy the double earlier on. It was just, I don't know why we didn't. And we took Fitz on an overnighter on the little seat. I think he was probably about a year old when we did that, because he needed lots of naps, and you can do it on the seat really. Yeah, and we're about to get the follow me. So Fitz is now 3 and he's just transitioning to a pedal bike. So I guess depends on that. He's not really getting on that well with it though. So
any changes on that, or does that sound about right to you guys? Similar?
Yeah, I think some of the trailers you can get sort of a baby sling for young kids, but it's really important that they hold their head up if they're just in the normal bit of the trailer. And they always advise that you speak to your midwife or your doctor, but maybe most people know their own kid and whether they're going to be able to survive it. I know a lot of people who want to cycle with really young babies. I mean, they're not necessarily going off-road, but the cargo bike is the option then, because you can actually fit a car seat in there so that they can be properly supported. But obviously they're a lifestyle decision if you're going to go car-free with your family, or do an awful lot of commuting with the bike, then it's worth a cargo bike. That's what I would do now if I was having a newborn. They just weren't available in the UK that I was aware of 14 years ago, so almost 15 years ago. In terms of the age for the follow me, every child is different, absolutely every child, and so you cannot say. One of my kids was learning to ride about 3, the other one was 5.5, I think, before he started to pedal. So you just have to be patient with each of them and not push them or put them under pressure. They'll do it in their own time.
Yeah, I'd agree with the age being totally dependent, and particularly my youngest is sort of grew up living on bicycles. Just the trailer was the place to nap in between activities, and it was about I had her sort of on the front seat of the bicycle quite a lot. This was just the saddle and the top tube, just to kind of make sure that she had enough balance. And I think that the two things for me with the follow me is that they've got the balance, and that they understand that they have to stay on there and not jump off at the traffic lights, or which has happened to my eldest, who's just he's a little bit kamikaze like that sometimes.
They can't fall asleep either. That's the important thing.
Yeah, not. You have to, when they're at that sort of younger age, you've got to watch out. And we deliberately had like a bike seat or a trailer for that purpose, so that if they were at risk of falling asleep or whatever, then we had that option. Trailers are this is a little sort of side fascination of mine in terms of what age you can start, and I've got into the geeky sort of side of it, but every brand will have their own recommendations. As far as I'm aware, Cruiser are the only brand that allow you to actually use the baby sling from pretty much birth, and the rules or guidance is slightly different depending on where you live. And this is because of the worry essentially around, you know, how safe it is for the children. But yeah, most manufacturers won't recommend that you use the baby sling in cycling mode. It'll only be for walking mode. And so it's kind of really down to you as parents to make that decision whether you think it's safe. But I think a lot of it comes down to common sense. You know, if you're going down a massive bumpy track, then it's just not going to be, you know, with a baby that can't support their own head, that's not going to be safe. But whether it's, you know, if it's a smooth sort of off-road place, then, you know, the risk is lower. For our first, we didn't get the trailer till I think it was about 9-10 months old, and we got the single, and then we upgraded to the double. And but yeah, with Sophie from 3 months old, but there was my main means of transport. I didn't drive really at the time. We had a car, but it was Liz that was using that predominantly.
Yeah, I think that's I definitely second the 2-child trailer. We had that, we got it straight away when we had one, because I mean it was happened to be on offer, but it's not that much bigger or heavier and more expensive. And you can, when we toured with one, it just meant you had more storage. You could put like a roll mat in the spare seat and stuff some sleeping bags in. So, and now we've got 2. It's obviously paid off. And I guess, yeah, that's the point about what age to start. There's a difference, isn't there, between having a child in a sling and going down a traffic-free promenade where it's completely smooth tarmac and then herring down a bouncy track, which is frankly what Laura and I ended up doing. We just did the cinder track and didn't realize quite how brutal it was. So the baptism of fire for our kid. And Karen, I just wanted to check on the cargo bike. You I think I've heard about it before, but you could just spell it out for me. The idea you can get a cargo bike, and do you put a car seat in it? Is that what you do?
Some of the bikes, some of the manufacturers have fixing points already in there, and they'll fit with a certain brand. It's a bit like, you know, the push chairs that will fit with a certain type of car seat, and you just sort of secure them in. So yeah, so I know quite a lot of families do that from a very young age.
And then what I'm trying to think, and then when they're bit bigger than that, do you keep them in? Could you keep them in a car seat when they're sort of 1 or 2, or there are other options, or you think?
Well, they then sit on the bench. They sit on the bench when they're old enough to sit up. Right. Yeah. See,
that's good. Sounds like I need another bike.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about cargo bikes, but now that's our main means of transport. We started off with the trailer, and yeah, the options are huge. And there's as well as the car seats, you've got specific sort of baby inserts again, which you can put in, and then different options as they get older as well, with sort of all the brands have different kind of seats, but yeah, a huge amount of flexibility with cargo bikes. And cargo bike touring is like another sort of sub niche in some ways, and there's some cool pictures and trips out there with people that have done that.
Got it's not mine. Cass left a long, like an extra cycle in our garage.
Oh, cool, yeah.
For us to try out, and that's quite cool. I had both kids mounted on that, one in front of me and one behind on seats. They've just tipped the weight point now. I can't handle it. It's a little bit unstable now, but you can get like a hoop that sits on the back. So basically, this is a long bike with a big platform at the back, and then these big panniers underneath, and you can get a little hoop that they sit in and hold on to, and it has like little foot pads that you can sit on. I haven't done the upgrade to put the little hoop thing on, but that's a possible stage now as well. And
called an extra cycle, did you say?
Yeah, that's right, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, they've got different versions, but essentially the extra cycle they're hard to get in the UK because they don't have a distributor. I've been thinking about trying to bring them in, but it is tricky. And yeah, you can basically take off the you basically replace or add on to the back of your current bicycle to give you an elongated I guess pannier rack essentially. So it creates a long tail cargo bike. Now there's quite a few long tail cargo bikes that are just bikes in their own right rather than being sort of add-on. But most of them now are being produced as electric cargo bikes. It's what we have with the sort of the bars at the back. That's essentially what the kids, my kids use now just to get about every day for swimming lessons and where else we're going.
Excellent. Listen, I'm aware I've gone over time and taken up extra of your time. So just a reminder, first a big thank you to the three of you and everyone else who's in the audience. Just a reminder, these three giving up their time for free. Everyone's volunteering at the festival. So a special thanks to them. If you're enjoying the festival, do consider giving a £10 donation, which you can do through the website. And just a few final notes just to say, Harriet, thank you very much. If you're doing anything in the Andes by bike and various guides, and as mentioned, she and her husband edited the Bible of Touring, the Adventure Cycle Touring Handbook. Karen's website and company, again, it's Cycle Sprog for all things related to cycling with kids and kit reviews, and I'm sure lots of the things we talked about she's already covered on there. And then Chris's company is Bambino Biking, and that for if you need kit for cycling with a bike, or you've got questions about what kit you need, then Chris is your man. So thank you very much for everyone. Thank you to the three of you. Thank you for everyone for turning up. Enjoy the rest of the festival, and see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, great session.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye.